Good evening, colleagues. You are welcome to another workshop on data collection. We just agreed that today we'll be focusing on observation as part of the data collection method. But I also want to go through these remarks that I always go through at the introduction. We continue to hold one-on-one sessions, and the days that are designated for the sessions are Mondays, Wednesdays, as well as Fridays. You are welcome to communicate and book the session for one-on-one via emails. And the emails can also be used to ask questions that I can respond to, or to make specific comments on any of the concepts that we always run through in the workshops. The other way of engaging or facilitating the one-on-one is when the documents are forwarded in the form of proposals, chapters 1 to the last chapter. I do comment on them. And after having commented and you receive the comments, you can still make follow-ups if something is not clear or it needs further attention. Then we again reconvene and we can go through the document again. And as always, I comment and forward the comments back to you and close the engagement. We have said that every time the workshop that we run, the basis of discussions are on the presentations, and the presentations are some sections or chapters from literature or articles that have been published. There I choose the article that is simpler for me to understand and which I can use as an example. That is why I always say that what we present here are not instructions, they are presentations to stimulate and steer discussions. They are guidelines. So the researcher has got an opportunity to either take what is presented or to reject. And as I always say, when you make a choice during the research process, when you decide on the methodology or the approach, you must always justify why you are choosing a specific approach or a specific research method. And at the same time, you can also downplay approaches or methods that do not support your studies. And then in most instances, you would be guided by your objectives on how to move forward with executing your research plan. So your objectives would serve as pointers towards the research methods as well as the literature to be consulted. So literature is very, very important. Now we're going to continue now with this workshop. And as always, I will start doing the introduction through the slides. When I've gone a mile, I would pause just to verify that we're moving together and just to give you an opportunity. If you feel you want to ask questions or you want to contribute in any way, whether making comment or indicating another concern that you have, and we engage from there. And in this workshop, I don't know everything, and there's nobody who does not know something. So you are encouraged to engage with the presentation, because I believe you might have read in anticipation that you will participate in the workshop. You might have read something about observation. So it should be easy to engage at one stage or another. But the focus of the workshop today, we will start by looking at what participant observation is. We will look at the diverse situations in which observation can be used or in which participant observation can be used. We will look at how we plan for participant observation, then some traditions or qualitative research that are used together with observation. We look at characteristics of observation. Here, there are a number of subheadings that we'll look at. Later on, the final part of the presentation focuses on the data for observational work, and which we refer to as field notes. So this is what the presentation will focus on. But at the end of this workshop, what do we think we should achieve? And this is in terms of the learning outcomes. We believe that after engaging with the session, we should be able to explain the meaning of observation. We should be able to elucidate the types of observation, or indicate or mention the types of observation. We should be able to analyze the data obtained from observation, and we should be able to list out the advantages and disadvantages of the observation method. And disadvantages and advantages would be presented as the last aspect of the workshop today. It is indicated that although there are many possible forms of data collection in the qualitative research toolkit, observing or observation and interviewing are predominant. When I engage with a lot of researchers and a lot of students, even before they could start preparing their research proposals, they will tell me that I will conduct interviews, I will develop a questionnaire. And sometimes we use these terminologies without even taking into account the full meaning. Because by the time someone mentions that, and is a first researcher, these are the people who have never interviewed anybody and who have never conducted any research. So they would not even understand what a questionnaire is, what an interview guide is, and what interviewing entails and what it is. Now, let alone observing. You see, you very rarely, I've just read, you will see as we continue with this workshop, that somewhere there's an indication that the very few people use observing, but people that use observation as a research method mostly also include interviewing, because somewhere there's going to be an argument that I will present that in most cases observing is used alongside other data collection methods. It might be used with interviews, it might be used with focus groups. The other time we actually on Tuesday, when we dealt with participatory action research data collection, we spoke about transect walks. And I just said that transect walks are an equivalent of surveys. And in surveys or in transect walks, what we do, we collect data through observation, because that is where, as I indicated last on Tuesday, sorry, it was actually last week. It is not Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. I indicated that after we had identified, we have done the mapping and we have done situational analysis, we identified areas on the maps or resources on the maps that should be visited, 2 or 3. And when we do that, we can only see those resources with eyes, and therefore that entails observation. So we use observation sometimes unaware, but we really plan for observation. This will become very evident as we continue. While most observers also include interviewing, now this is what I've just said, many interviewers do not include observation. In one of the studies, I noted that I was going to use focus groups only, but then I added in-depth interviews. But when I did the reporting, then I included that I also observed. And I know why the study leader encouraged me to include observation. is because it's very, it's actually impossible not to see people with who you are engaging when you're collecting data. If you are collecting data and you're talking to people, you would look at them, at their faces, you would look at their hands, their feet, their bodies. You can sometimes even spot their behaviors. And when that happens, it means that the process of observing is taking place. So sometimes we are unaware we do this, we do observation. Even if at some stage we would not even write in our reports under the research methods that we did observe, but we sometimes do observe and we always do observe. The only thing is that we would not have described how the observations uh, took place or do take place. It takes some special skills and a certain confidence to be a successful observer. You see now, there is also a rich tradition called deep ethnography that might be covered in future workshops. If we get time, we will touch on this one. I haven't read that one, and I'm not ready for it today. But this is only to show that there are different types of observing, ways of observing. But in this workshop, we will tackle the basics of observational data collection, or we can refer to it as participant observation. And participant observation is specifically useful in such fields as developmental psychology, anthropology, behavioral modification, social psychology, and evaluation research. Observation can be used both in the laboratory as well as in naturalistic settings. In the laboratory, you've got control over the people or over the sources of data that you collect. If you call people and you take them out from their homes and you sit them in a classroom or in a hall, that mimics a laboratory because they're not in their natural setting. They are in an artificial setting because no one stays in a classroom or lives in a classroom because they've got homes, and where they've got homes, there are houses, playground, roads, a lot of things that and the activities that take place there. But in the classroom, you've got a limited space to perform everything and to house everybody. So that environment mimics a laboratory. So a naturalistic setting is one area where data can be collected through the use of participant observation, and the other one is laboratory. Although behavioral scientists have largely used this method in the naturalistic settings, it also forms a significant component of experimental procedure, as we've said, both field and laboratory. Indeed, in laboratory settings, careful observation of subjects may not only shed light on the limitations of the experimental procedures, but also they can generate ideas for future research. That is, if you're using an experiment. Now, let's just understand what a participant observation is. Now, the next a number of slides are going to assist us in understanding what authors, what literature say about participant observation. While interviewing helps us understand how people make sense of their words, observing them helps us understand how they act and behave. And you will see later on, we're going to talk about what a person does and what a person thinks, whether what a person thinks and does are synchronizing. And I think it should be in these slides or the next slides. Sometimes these actions and behaviors belie what people think or say about their beliefs and values and practices. You know what happens? We continue to think that I'm a better person, I'm a Christian. I'm like this and that and that. Or I am not that person. I am not xenophobic. But in actual fact, when in practice, people can perceive you as a xenophobic person. You acting against foreign nationals. Now, what we want to indicate here is that although we might have different thinking, the only way in which we can know how someone behaves how someone acts is when we see them, when we look at them. That is through observation. So a person who would in his heart believe that is not xenophobic, but in his behavior, he would be seen to be xenophobic. So that is how observation can assist us. For an example, a person can tell you they would never racially discriminate, but observing how they actually interact with racialized others might undercut those statements. As I've said, in terms of xenophobic, this is not always about dishonesty. Most of us tend to act differently than we think we do or think we should, but it is just human nature. When we dealt with a conceptual framework, there was a concept which we referred to as tacit theories, and I think we might have not even um, I might have not even workshopped that one because it was far ahead towards the end of the presentation. And as we did not finish the presentation, it was still yet to come. But what tacit theories talks about is talking about what I believe are my values. And what I believe is what I want to do and I want to be seen. But the other thing that a person does not know is that you have got the conscious way of behaving and unconscious way of behaving. And through the unconscious way, that is where the true self is revealed, where a human being's true nature is revealed. Whether this person steals or does not. He will say, no, I don't steal, I don't do these things. But we will see him actually doing things which is actually against what he preaches. So tacit theories are telling you that you've got the unconscious way of doing things, which is exactly what you is part and parcel of you. And sometimes consciously we will express things that we wish we would to be. And now there is this contradiction in our lives. But the author here is saying, while I behave differently than what I prophesize or I preach, it's not that I would necessarily be doing it intentionally or deliberately. It is human nature that we do have the unconscious spot. That is how we're going to be discovered. Through observation, we'll be seen this guy is indeed what he behaves, not what he says. If you are interested in what people say and believe, interviewing is a useful technique for data collection. But if you are interested on how people act and believe or behave, observing them is essential. Now, I always say that when you choose a research method or a research approach, you must always justify it. Now, the other aspect that I did not say is that your purpose of the study, your objectives of the study should actually determine the methodology to be used. Oh, actually, I did say that. So we are saying if I intend to gather the perceptions of people, to collect data through the perceptions of people, so maybe it is better to interview them. So because I would hear them telling me things, how they believe, how they perceive things. So maybe that is a better technique of data collection, that one of interviewing. But if I want to know how people act or how people behave, then the recommendation is observing is the better research method to be used. So this is just an advice from an author. But then the ball is in the court of the researcher, the ball is in the court of the student who want to achieve a specific objective. Do you think observing will assist you? Or you think you need to do questionnaires, or you need to do focus groups, you need to do in-depth interviews or one-to-one interviews? That is a decision that should be made by a researcher. And it should be in line with the research objectives and purpose as we've indicated earlier on. And if you want to know both, particularly how thinking and believing and acting and behaving complement or contradict each other, then a combination of interviewing and observing is ideal. So people can triangulate. I can't say, okay, although they tell me that, oh, these people do not drink during Saturdays, these people do not drink on over weekends or on Sundays. Then apart from asking them these questions, apart hearing them talking, then I also want to observe. Then I'm triangulating, and that actually assists me to validate what I'm hearing from them. So That contradiction actually helps me to analyze my data that although they say they don't drink, we noted that these people were drinking on one of the Saturdays. Therefore, our conclusion is these people do drink, but they do not want to be known that they drink over Saturday. That is data analysis. So you can triangulate, you can use the two methods in order to collect data, in order to achieve two objectives. The other one is to hear them telling you their perceptions. The other one is actually knowing and seeing how they behave and how they act. When you triangulate, then the truth is somewhere in between. There is the talk and the behavior or the action. Actions speak louder than words. That is a statement that I know from English. There are a variety of terms we use for observational data collection, from ethnography to fieldwork to participant observation. Many researchers use these terms interchangeably, but we will now today define them separately. Then we can use the other one that is suitable for us. And I think participant observation, because we're going to talk about the general observation process today. The subject of this chapter or subject of this workshop is observation in general or participant observation too, so that we can highlight the fact that observers can also be participants. And mainly because today we are talking about the basics of observation, participant observation. But at some stage, the subject will be a deep ethnography. That is when we get time in future, we can also focus on a deep ethnography, which is a particularly immersive form of study that is attractive for a certain subject or subset of qualitative researchers. Both participant observation and deep ethnography are forms of field work in which the researcher leaves their office and she or he goes into a natural setting to record observations that take place in that setting out there in the field. If it is an experiment, it should be out there where the individuals are found or where the unit of analysis is found. So the participant observation and deep ethnography referred to as fieldwork because they all take place out of the office. Participant observation, referred to as PO, is a field approach to gathering data in which the researcher enters a specific site for purposes of engagement or observation. Someone is in the field. He gathers data there through engaging or observation. He's engaging the stakeholders of the people that are sources of the information. He observes them. This method can be conceptualized as a continuum, and any given study can fall somewhere on that line between full participation and observation. Full participation is where a researcher is a member of the community or organization being studied. So if I stay there and I intend to study there, it means I'm exercising what is referred to as full participation. So if I'm Movenda and I'm in Tondo and there are people that speak Chivenda and I'm interested on the Chivenda culture, I don't have to be imported to come here. I'm already part of them. And there I participate fully in the collection of data. But if I pretend to be a fly on the wall, surreptitiously, but mostly by permission, recording what happens. In other words, I am an outsider, somebody who has come in the area where he does not stay, and I observe and want to take data, then I record and collect it to go and analyze for purposes of my studies or for any other project. Then there I am referred to as an observer. That is what is observation. Participant observation forms the heart of ethnographic research. Research, yes, it forms the heart of ethnographic research, an approach, if you remember, that seeks to understand and write about a particular culture or subculture. This is what we will still explore if indeed we will focus on ethnography. In ethnography, researchers often embedded themselves for months, if not years or even decades, with a particular group to be able to fully capture what it is like. Remember decades. A decade is something like 10 years. 5 years you can be in the field, 10 years you can be in the field, for months, 6 months or 7 months you can be in the field. That is when you are collecting data through ethnography. But there are lighter versions of participant observation that can form the basis of a research study, or that can supplement or work with other forms of data collection, such as interviews or archival research. And I've said at some stage, I've used observation together with focus groups. And I've also indicated during participatory action research, I've used transect walks as observations. And in that way, because we did have workshop, we did have mapping, we did have situational analysis, then it was triangulation. So it was this lighter version of method that was used in collaboration or in supplementing other methods. Now, we are now going to focus on the lighter versions. Now, in other words, on participant observation that can be supplemented with other research methods or that can supplement them. It should be noted, however, that much of what is said here can also apply to deep ethnography. Yes, it's okay, we'll see it if we'll be able to do that. But participant observation methods of gathering data present some special considerations, which are: how involved is the researcher? Is the researcher deeply involved, or the researcher has just come as a visitor? Now, if you stay for decades, for 20 years, or for a decade, 10 years, or for 5 years, or even years, then it means you might be perceived as deeply involved. Or if you stay there, you were born in Tando or you were born in Tswane and you're doing research in Tswane, at those people that stay there with you, your culture, and you share everything with them, then you are deeply involved. But if you visit only for purposes of data collection, you're not very deeply involved. Now, the other thing is, how close is she or he to the subject or site being studied? How close is that researcher? And how might her or his own social location, identity, positionality affect the study? You remember we spoke about reflexity, and we spoke about positionality as something that comes in with a person's experience. It comes with a person's paradigm, experience, background, knowledge, tacit theories, everything that is made that person to be what he is. Then how will that affect the study? So that is another consideration. So how the person is involved, how close the person is to the subject matter or the unit of analysis or to the setting, and how he or she might affect the study. And I've said in social research, social sciences, you see, most of what we do is value imbued because we are human beings. We don't believe that a human being should be be very objective with data collection. We believe that our data collection processes, our research process is value imbued. It's influenced by us in as far as we are influenced by the process of conducting research, because through research you learn something, you are affected, you develop, you become a doctor, or you become someone who holds the degree of honors, or somebody who holds a degree of masters or postgraduate diploma in any of the studies that you are pursuing. So you develop, so you are affected. You also affect because you will eventually interpret the data, and when you interpret the data, you use your brain. You say that people always say that a giraffe is a tall animal, but I don't think a giraffe is a tall animal, but I can better describe it as a beautiful animal. You see, now that is your own interpretation. So you are impacting on the results. So you are influencing and impacting on the study itself. So those three are the important consideration in observation research. These are actually great questions for any kind of qualitative data collection, but particularly apt when the researchers enter the field, so to speak. So all these things become evident. How close you are, how involved you are, and what impact you bring is mainly becomes evident by the time you approach, you go to the field, you commission your field work, you execute your research plan, where you collect data. Now, when you're collecting from people, then you engage with them. Some of them, what about if while you're collecting data, you are told things that are not the truth? And this is the reason why we also consider the importance of triangulation. So you are affected, you affect the study. And this, we are told, happens as soon as you go into the field. It is helpful at this stage to visualize where one falls on a continuum or series of continuation. Sorry, yeah, a series of continuation. It's important to visualize where one falls. Are you deeply involved? We have been asking this. Are you superficially involved? Are you too close? Are you a little bit distant? Do you affect a little bit, or you highly affect the study, or you are affected just to a small degree? Let us take a few examples and see how these continue work, and think about each of the following scenarios and map. And yes, I'll just ask, and I'm not referring to that figure which I write there as 13.1, but I want you to visualize or to determine and think how much you think you would be involved, or someone is involved, or someone is the closeness of someone to the studies setting, or the study population, and how much he is affected. Now, the first example is, consider a nursing student during COVID who's doing research on patient or doctor interaction in the ICU. Here, I want to tease you, and I want you, when I pause, because as soon as I finish talking, making reference to this slide, I would pause so that you can also engage with what I'm engaging. Now, take for an example, it is COVID. And during COVID, COVID is contagious. If someone sneezes, then you're going to be affected. That is why all of us had to put masks. And if you didn't have a mask, then it was a law, you could even be arrested, then we have to take action against you. And we say, when you get sick, it's maybe because you're not taking care of yourself by putting on a mask. Or you're not taking an injection, an anti-COVID, whatever. Those two, there were two types of injections that we took here in South Africa. But the most important aspect is when there is a patient and a doctor has to treat a COVID-infected patient, and the doctor knows that there is likelihood that he or she can be affected. And we have heard how these people were hailed that, okay, during COVID, they're the ones who were taking care of us. All of us, most of the people that were working had to shut down or had to operate remotely so that we don't infect each other. But we're saying, how close will a doctor, or how close will a patient and a doctor would be, and how would they interact in an ICU when a patient cannot move herself or himself but is COVID infected, and someone must move that person, and that person is a doctor? Just think about it. I'm going to ask you a question when I stop. Do you think the doctor would be happy to be closer to the patient, or would the patient like doctors to come closer to her and nurses to come closer to him or to her so that this person can be assisted? That is one example that we can look at. Let me just read if the others make it relevant, but bear it in mind because I'm going to ask you a question. Another example is of a graduate student who accompanies a police officer. Maybe this graduate student is one studying police law, South African, studying the degree in police or degree in security, safety and security. So he accompanies a police officer during her rounds one day in a part of the city the graduate student has never visited. And this graduate student is actually on practical to see how a policeman arrests a suspect, or how a policeman investigates a case against murder or against theft or robbery or whatever. How close will these people be to the setting or to the people that have committed offense? Another example, a professor called Amish, then she goes back to her hometown to conduct a research. No, sorry. It is a professor who is from a culture called Amish. And this person is working somewhere at another university away from the home where the Amish culture is. But sometimes this person goes back and he or she wants to conduct research on the Amish culture or on the Amish marriage practices for 1 month. Now, how close is that person? How far is that person? How would that person affect the research process? This person is from an Amish culture, but this person does not stay there now. Is working in a university which is a little bit far from the culture. How close will he be? Now, the other one is a sociologist who visits the Eastern Cape initiation schools. He visits initiation schools. He is a very customary person. But he has studied sociology at the University of South Africa. Then, every time during winter, he goes to go and visit these initiation schools for the young boys, the Xhosa-speaking boys from the Xhosa culture. He visits there every year. And then, 1 year when he's there, he decides to write down his observation on 1 year. And there he wants to write an article through participant observation. So I want you to put this in mind. I'm going to pause now, and this is going to assist me and to establish if we are moving together. Then I think in these slides, although you could not have been touched in other slides, in this slide you should have been touched that, oh, I can be too close or I can be very far. And I want to start with the one on COVID. And I will only look that one as an example. And I want to hear your comments on that one. How close do you think a doctor should be when somebody is infected with COVID? And I'm going to stop the presentation mode so that I can also see you raising hand. And Cecily Ndola will assist me to identify those that are raising hands so that we give them an opportunity to make their own comments. And as I peruse and I go back to to where you are, let me see hands being raised and let me hear comments, because I believe we were moving together. I want to tell you one thing, colleagues. I have never designed a research method called participant observation. But what I've done is that I've naturally observed the behavior of the people that I was interviewing or I was engaging with when I was collecting data. So I want to have a lot of living examples, but I do have living examples of gaining entry, which we'll refer to here, and the only living example maybe of the observation that I did was when I did the transact walks. And the podium is open, colleagues, and if you can engage with the presentation. How close do you think the doctor and the patient will be, and who will want to move closer to the other, and will the other one want to run away from him or from her? Can I just hear your comment, please? And here, if I don't get comments, I'm going to be surprised, because this is the simplest form of an example. And it is very practical because COVID was there and all of you did see what COVID did and you experienced it. And you might have also put on the mouth covers so that you can protect yourselves from the infection.
I was saying that I can try to say that as the patient, would really want the doctor to be close to me so that I can get assistance, be it with the COVID or any other infections or problems that I'll be experiencing. And me in the shoes of the doctor, I would be very skeptical. However, it is my responsibility as a doctor to help those that are in need. So yeah,
Yes.
hospitality.
Thank you very much for the comment. Thank you. And Lebu, Lebu, what's your comment?
Uh,
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes.
From my understanding, or let me say from my suggestion, if it was me being in that patient's shoes, definitely I would really want the doctor to help me so I can get better and get out of the hospital, because definitely it's a nice experience. But at the same time as well, looking at the doctor as well, honestly speaking, I would understand if he or she didn't want to be so close to me, because
Yeah.
firstly he will get to think of his life and his family, because after running his
Mm.
duties, he needs to return home. Now,
Yeah.
when you get home, it's another problem to say, "Ish, my kids, my partner, anyone
Yes.
that is close to." But
Yeah.
again, on the other hand, it will be
Yeah.
much better for the doctor to wear that, tough face to say, in order for us to get rid of this, we need to be strong and help
Yes.
all our patients to get the proper treatment, so that we can even also reduce the amount of infections, the amount of deaths, and yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I think
Eh,
that's my little piece. Thank
Quite
you.
interesting. Thank you very much. And Tawang, your comment, quite interesting.
According to me, I see like the nursing student want to understand and have more detail on what the doctor is doing. So but on the patient's end, patients want to get healed and want to go back home. So it's a doctor's duty to perform whatever we want to perform to make the patients is happy and healthy.
Mhm.
But also as a student, I want to make as a student want to understand the process followed by the doctor. So for the future, for
Mhm.
experience purposes, it also goes with the second one of a police officer.
Yes.
Yes, but the fourth one, the third and the fourth day, I man, sorry.
You know, you must remember, if I was a student doctor or a student nurse who is observing what the doctor does and the relationship between the doctor and the patient, you could see that although this doctor preaches that he has got a calling and he likes to deal with patients, you could see that this doctor is afraid of a patient because he's afraid of COVID. He doesn't want to go too close to her. He is even his touch is not as normal as when COVID was not there. So all these things can be seen because we can observe, but you will not even see what is inside the doctor and what is inside the patient. We could see that the patient is actually expecting these things, although she's not saying it, and that the doctor is afraid of the patient, although all of them are not talking about it. So this is what observation is all about, and I think is very, very interesting. So those that are interested on using this method, it's better to look at it, see, we'll talk about its advantages and its disadvantages at the end. Then you can see if it is a good method. But I think it's a very good method when you want to supplement. Because remember, non-verbal communication is very, very important. When a person says, no, I like you, but you can see that, oh, the eyes are talking somehow, or the face is talking somehow. So they are just warning us that now what we do, how we behave, can be observed and be part and parcel of the findings in the research. And with observation, with behavior, there is nothing wrong there. But something can go wrong with talking because I can tell a lie or can speak the truth. But you cannot behave wrongly because there's that unconscious side of a human being. Thank you very much for all those three comments. Quite interesting. Let me go back um, to the presentation and we can continue. Now, we're still talking about what this participant observation is. Depending on how the researcher answers those questions and where they stand on the um, um, continuum, various techniques will be more or less effective. For an example, in cases where the researcher is a participant, writing a reflective field note at the end of the day may be the primary form of data collection. If you are, you will later on see that if you are a full participant, colleagues, is when you are living with the community there. And the time to write these things is not available at the time of living the life with them. You see, when I'm in Thohoyandou, I cannot write about the Bavenda culture while I'm walking in the streets of Thohoyandou, or while I'm in a taxi or whatever, or I'm somewhere drinking Marula beer with them. And so I cannot write but it does very well according to the proposed method here, that while I am at home, while we were drinking, this guy was actually teasing others while we were drinking. This guy got drunk and he could not even walk, and he started teasing other people, and they don't know him. So this is how they think you can do. But if you are not full-time there, then they will later on indicate that you have got an opportunity to write, because the less involved you are, the more the opportunity for you to write. But the more involved you are, it reduces your capacity and your opportunity to write and make field notes. After all, if the researcher is fully participating, they probably don't have the time or ability to pull out a notepad and ask people questions. Now, I want to say something here, even before we could move further, that I read towards the end of this presentation that when people know that they are being studied, they actually change their behavior and they want to behave well, so that they should not be known to behave differently or badly. But when it is known that these people are, if it is not known that they are being studied, then they behave in a natural way, in a normal way. And that is where you get the reality of the data. So there is a difference. That is why there's difference between being fully involved and being partially involved. And the behavior of the researcher, the manner of taking data or taking these field notes differs. On the other side, when a researcher is more of an observer, this is exactly what they might do. So, so long as the people they are interacting are able to answer while they are going about their business, then they will be able to write. Because this is an observer. He is not a full participant. He is not an original person coming from there. Or he's not spending a lot of time with them. He is just visiting and he will be able to go back in a short span of time. The more an observer, the more likely the researcher will engage in relatively structured interviews if you are just an observer, because you've got an opportunity to write these things using techniques discussed in the previous workshops, such as interviews and focus groups. The more a participant, the more likely casual conversations or unstructured interviews will form the core of the data collection. You see, in unstructured interviews, you won't even be able to write. You write at home. You don't write on site, because this is unstructured. It doesn't have any preset questions that have to be answered. But in something that is semi-structured, you've got something that you base your questioning, your observations on. So you are guided by an interview guide or an observation guide that lists things that must be observed while you are on the field. And in which situation do we use participant observation? Here, we're going to list some of them here. When you are trying to understand an ongoing process or situation, through observation, you can monitor or watch a process or situation that you are evaluating as it occurs. We want to evaluate and observe the process of xenophobia in South Africa. So we become observers. We want to see how the foreign nationals are treated by the South Africans. Do they always want to close their sponsors, or do they embrace them? Or we want to see how the foreign internationals are infiltrating South Africa. Are they taking over their business, the South African businesses, or they're actually expanding their own businesses? Or are they infiltrating, getting married to the females in South Africa or to the males in South Africa, so that they can have an opportunity of acquiring full citizenship? Then these requires processes, and these need long-term participation in the process of observing, so that the full dynamic and a long-term observation takes place, for which a full and a rich data can be generated. When you are gathering data on individual behaviors or interactions between people, that is another way where you can use participants observation between interaction between people. Also, you can use it um, to watch people's behaviors and interactions directly, or watch for the results of the behaviors or interactions. When you need to know as well, when you need to know about a physical setting, that is setting in an environment where sometimes when something is taking place, it can also help increase the understanding of the event, the activity, or the situation you are evaluating. For an example, you can observe whether a classroom or a training facility is conducive for learning. You see, a setting is an area, a place where data is being collected. You cannot know how the setting is if you don't go to the field, and if you do not observe. If you are collecting data via telephone, or you just send questionnaires, mailed questionnaires, and people send back the responses, you don't even know who responded, and you don't know under which conditions the respondent was, whether he was sick, whether he was ill, or he didn't eat, or he was angry, you do not know, because you only just sent a paper that goes away. But they're saying, if you want to know how this person was, you observe him where he stays, and that is in the setting, including himself. You can also use it when data collection from individuals is not realistic. It's not is not a realistic option. If respondents are unwilling or unable to provide data through questionnaires or interviews, which are a form of collecting data from individuals, then you can resort to the use of participant observation. But how do we plan for it? In planning observation of the event or something, any other activity, the following points will have to be kept in mind. You determine the focus. Think about the evaluation questions you want to answer through observation and select a few areas of focus for your data collection. For example, you may want to know how well the psychology curriculum is being implemented in the classroom. Your focus areas might be interactions between students and teachers' knowledge, skills, and behaviors. Colleagues, you must remember, you are collecting data in order to accomplish a specific objective. And our research studies have got a number of objectives. And when we collect data, we are going to collect data that assist us to answer research questions, and as advised and as directed by the research objectives. Your research aims, you've got a problem to solve. So your study focus, the focus, what you are collecting, should be informed by those, so that the data indeed can assist you building back to the research report. So the focus is something that we need to determine. On what do I collect data? So when you've got an interview guide, of course, you would have listed, I want to understand the relationship between academic facilitators under the Sunnyside campus and the enrolled masters or PhD students. So that would be the focus, if indeed that is what someone is investigating. Design a system for data collection. Once you have focused your evaluation, think about the specific item for which you want to collect data, and then determine how you will collect the information you need. Are you going to tape record, to cassette people? Are you going to write what they are telling you? Are you going to use an interview guide to collect data? How would you record the responses? There are three primary ways of collecting observation data. These three methods can be combined to meet your data collection needs. Or here, they are going to set them down here. Recording sheets and checklists. Here, you have these because these are the most standardized way of collecting observation data and include both preset questions and responses. There, you've got questions that you always want some people to respond. And in front there, you can as well leave spaces when people respond. So you have this in advance. That is why it is called part and parcel of planning. You You've got sheets and checklists that are prepared in advance that are going to be used in the field. These forms are typically used for collecting data that can be easily described in advance. That is a topic that might be covered in a psychotherapy lesson or any other any topic that you need to pursue, you want to explore. You you also need to prepare observation guides, as I've said, where you list the interactions, the process or behaviors to be observed, with space to record open-ended narrative. And we've said this. Field notes are the least standard ways of collecting observation data and do not include preset questions or responses. Field notes are open-ended narratives data that can be written or dictated onto a tape recorder. Sometimes when you're collecting data, you remember, there is what people will tell you, and there are those things that are only known by you, that are seen by you, by your eyes. You need to record them for yourself in the way they influence you and the way they affect you. You write them as field notes, although these are not necessarily part and parcel of what is a response to preset questions. You see, you've got an interview guide or a list observation guide that has got things that must be responded to, and you are guided by that when you want people to respond to, when you engage with them. But you cannot dictate what you will see in the field before you go there. When a person would be responding to you while he's smoking a cigar, you wouldn't know. While another person would be talking to you while they're laughing, you don't know about that. But another group of people will be talking to you, but will be holding their hands or will be walking or standing, sitting. No one would anticipate that. So you need in your field notes to be able to record. So this is open-ended, as long as you've got a place where you can record them. And selecting a science, we know that every time you have got to know where the study location is located, and that is where data is going to be collected. Select an adequate number of sites to help ensure that they are representative of the larger population and will provide an understanding of the situation you are observing. This time, you're not only identifying people that you are actually engaging or observing with, you also the site, because if you're going to stay there for months, if you're going to stay there for a full day or for a week, so it is in an area. It's not only a person. It's a person together with his surrounding. So it is a site. So it has got people, it has got activities, and that is where data is collected. And then you can also, there's also a recommendation that you can select observers. If there are people who are willing to participate, you can also involve them. You can involve interns, you can involve other professional staffs, people that are interested, as sociologists that are also interested on participant observation, you can include them. Graduate students that learner researchers can be taken across, or experienced researchers can be taken across. Volunteers that want to help us in conducting research can also be included. But sometimes you can also do it on your own without the involvement of anybody else. And if you decide that you're going to use other people and these people are not familiar with the research method, then you've got to train them how to do the observations, because even yourself has to train yourself to understand it better, how the method is executed. It is critical that the observers are well trained in your data collection process to ensure high quality and consistent data. You see now, the level, remember, if you've got an observation guide, it means all your trainers need to be trained how to use that guide. And all of them, wherever they are and with who they are engaging, then it means they are guided on what to ask and on how to observe, so that data is relevant to to the topic that is under investigation. The level of training will vary based on the complexity of the data collection and the individual capabilities of the observers. So others are fast learners, others are slow learners, and some aspects of observation are so complex. So you either get geared very fast, or others would be slow. And time your observation appropriately. Programs and processes typically follow a sequence of events. It is critical that you schedule your observation so that you are observing the components of the activity that will answer your evaluation questions. This requires advanced planning. So if I know that I will go, I always want to collect data in the Eastern Cape about the initiation schools of the boys. Then I must know that this is always done in winter, and I do my connections, whether it is gaining entry and planning, so that by the time it is time that the initiation schools are opening or are established, then I'm also ready. I go there at the time when the event is taking place. And maybe I must again stop here so that I can allow interaction, engagements, and the questioning process. Now I'm going back to check if there are people raising hands that want to intervene. The floor, the podium is open again. We have just gone over an hour 10 minutes. So we are left with 50 minutes to cover the remaining discussion. And if there are no hands, it's fine. You can be cooling, but when I pause next time, may I request that you also engage. Let me go back and do the presentation mode. And I will run here just to indicate that observational techniques are used whenever the researcher wants to document actual behaviors and practices as they happen. And there are many traditions of inquiry that employ observation data collection, but not all traditions employ them in the same way. But deep ethnography, these are those studies that take as their focus the documentation through the description of a culture or a subculture. And there's grounded theory, where theories emerge. This is from a rigorous and systematic process of induction. This is amenable to both interviewing and observing forms of data collection. And symbolic interactionism as well, often closely aligned with grounded theory in sociology, is the tradition of symbolic interaction, which can also use observation. And the other one is phenomenology, where this strategy typically foregrounds interviewing, as the purpose of this tradition is to gather people's understandings and mirrors about a phenomenon. And meanings about a phenomenon. So these are the traditions that use observation as a data collection method. I don't have experience in most of these, and I do not have a living example. There's also critical theories such as standpoint approaches, feminist theories, and critical race theory, which are often met method in design. So that was just some of the traditions that actually use observation. Now we're going to look now at the characteristics of observation. These characteristics can be put under various categories. The most important task of an observer is to classify behaviors into categories which must be precisely defined by the researcher. So we now, under the characteristics, are going to look at the units of observation and what these are. The issue of unit of behavioral observation is still unresolved. By using small and easily observed and recorded units, the researcher may enhance the reliability. But however, by doing so, he or she is likely to damage the validity of his or her observation. Because I think here the argument is, if you are very specific, then you lose the totality of a phenomenon being examined. Because a human being is a total human being. But if you only examine him how his legs move, and you don't want to know how the hands are attached to the body and the head. Now, see, you need to look at if you are studying the movement of a human being, you must look at his posture, his gesture in totality. You cannot single out one thing. Now, here they're saying if you do it like that way, you go to the micro. I think it's the molecular approach, they will refer to it as such. It means you lose the focus of the study, because your focus of study has got that broad focus that I want to study how the doctor engages with a patient. So you cannot only look at how he puts an injection. You must look at the totality, how he carries the person, the 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 person with that bed, that patient bed, how he touches the other blankets, how he administers other oral medication except the injection, how he puts on the bandage and everything, how he puts on his mask and how he puts on his gloves. So that is what should happen in totality, so that you don't lose the focus of the study. Now, the validity can be enhanced by using a broad natural definitions. The clash between reliability and validity is related to the molar to molecular problem of measurement. While the molar approach involves larger behavior wholes as unit of behavior. So you looking a person at totality or the environment in its totality rather than to look at just one part of the setting. The molecular approach relates to the smallest component of the behavior as a unit of observation. You can see what they mean here. Molecular and molar. Molar is more broader and captures what the original intent is by the researcher. But if you go minute and you go you go deep and only choose a small component of what is being observed, then you are likely to lose the focus of the study. Thus, she has to rely on his or her own experience and interpretation of the meaning of the behavior being observed. On the other hand, in the molecular approach, the observer sets aside his or her own experience and interpretation and record what he or she sees. Oh, they are saying reliability is there in the molecular, which is the minute, but the other thing is you lose the general approach, the general focus of the study, because they're saying with the molar approach, the observer may initiate his or her observation with a general variable and record varied behaviors under the one rubric. For an example, the molar observer may interpret the broadly defined team-based management style as maximum concern for task and maximum concern for people. However, the molecular observer may use further fragmentation indicated in the 8 categories cited earlier, and thus take them as units of observation. I did not cite the example referred to in here. But the difference is that the molecular looks at the minute, whereas the molar looks at the broader aspect of the research focus. And what about sampling? The crux of the observational study is who and what, where and when questions. Who do you include? What do you include? Where do you execute the study? And when? And these have to be answered in sampling. The units of observation can be divided into 2 categories, the molar and the molecular, as we have said. The molar involves observing larger units of activity as a whole, whereas the molecular approach uses small and highly specific behaviors as the unit of observation. These 2 categories are not mutually exclusive. I think there's a continuum in between them. For an example, the researcher may use the molar approach at the beginning of the study and change to the molecular one as he or she familiarity with and understanding of the insider and the environment grows. Now, if someone starts understanding, say for instance, somebody started to examine the phenomenon under investigation broadly, not going into the specifics. I'm examining the relationship between this doctor and the patients. Oh, he always is laughing. He's always loving them. But as we go inside the surgery room, we find that this guy, he does not only love, but he loves and he embraces them and he carries them, he nurses them very, very closely. So that is when we go to the minute. Outside the surgery room, then he is greeting everybody, talking to them, laughing with them, and doing perceiving them, welcoming them. But when he deals specifically with them, we even see that he is very cautious when he puts injections. He does not want to hurt his patients. So that is the difference between the molecular and the molar behavior or approaches. To get rich and in-depth information, it's important for the researcher to know the best times to observe. We must observe in winter if we want to go to the initiation schools in the Eastern Cape and meet with individual insiders as well as whom she or he would interview. Who are those people that we need? There are people who are always leaders in the initiation schools. There are those that establish. The chiefs, the traditional leaders, are the ones who give permission that an initiation school can also be facilitated in my area. And traditional healers, I know in our culture, in the Venda culture, are the ones that always establish these schools under the auspices of a traditional leader. So those are the people that can be approached. Those are the people from who you can engage in order to gather data with respect to initiation schools. Extended time in the field and the activity participation in the group's function increases the researcher's ability to judge these things. Researchers can also seek out insiders who exemplify characteristics of interest, as well as those who have considerable experience in the group, because these people can help the researcher better understand the environment. You see, the traditional leaders would not always be there in initiation schools, but there are elders who are there, but not that they don't know anything. So they will be able even to engage with you and they can describe why they establish it, under which conditions, and what they're trying to achieve in the area under their leadership. Finally, the researcher may want to use snowball sampling as a way to link with others in a group. In other words, you want to know everybody who would be able to give you good information. And here, that is where this data sampling design is required. Some snowball, because people will tell you, hey, so and so can also tell you better about traditional initiation schools. Snowball sampling is a good method to use because insiders who have been referred by a friend may be more willing to talk with the researcher. And how much do we interfere? What is the degree of inference? The extent of the observer inference also varies in terms of her approach. In a molecular approach, there is little scope for inference because a lot of things are detailed and they are there. You're not just interpreting things superficially, but you specifically, it is explicit. You see, the information is explicit because you were told with the specifics that when we go to initiation schools, we look at the age of boys. We will not take boys who are underage, or will not take boys who are above age. So you know these minute things and these details, and the protocol that must be followed in taking one to the initiation school is made very, very clear. Rather than to say, no, people in the Eastern Cape go to initiation schools in winter. That is very, very superficial. So molecular approach, legal inference, but specificity. The observer merely knows what the individual does or says. However, in actual practice, there are very few observation systems requiring a low degree of observer inference. Indeed, most researchers use systems involving a high degree of inference on the part of the observer. Yeah, that is if there are systems that are used. Here they say they are there, and I'm not interested on them here today. But this is what can be used maybe to manage the research process. Also, you infer a lot or you infer very little, because you either have collected detailed information or you've collected broad information about broad aspects. And how do we gain access and leave the site? Because we know that when we conduct research, we must get permission. The permission of those that are being investigated and permission of those that are in authority. So all of it must be obtained. Managing your entry into the field site is one of the most important, and it is nerve-wracking aspect of doing ethnographic research. Unlike interviews, which can be conducted in neutral settings, the field is an actual place which is with its own rules and customs that you are seeking to explore. How you gain access will depend on what kind of field you are entering. If you are in a physical location with walls, say for instance, it is in an office, another government department, then you're gonna get approval from the authorities. Uh, Sometimes the negotiation take long or short, but if you you are collecting data in a street, there's no gatekeeper, there's nobody who stops you there, and maybe you don't need to get permission, but you can get permission of the people that are going to be involved in the study itself. Therefore, what we're saying is that apart from authorities, even the people from who you're going to gather data um, must give consent. You know what happens in participant observation, and if you are observing about the culture and the behavior of a person, you have to work with that person on a daily basis. Imagine when you're watching someone from morning to evening, and that people know that you are watching them, and you work with them wherever they go. You do everything whatever they're doing. Eh? You have to have permission. Can someone allow you to watch him like a watchdog, like a policeman? Wherever he goes, you are there just because you want to collect data and understand his culture or his behavior. So you need to have permission, and you have to have good relations with those people. Some places are semi-public, such as the malls or the shops. There, when you get permission, maybe the management of the shopping mall, or somebody who is in a store, or if you're not gathering data in to those premises, but you just want to collect data from anybody, then do you have to have permission to interview people that you are coming across, that are shopping, people that are actually providing services in a shopping mall, but not in a specific building. Even with official permission to enter the site, however, your quest to gain access is not done. You will still need to gain the trust and permission of the people you encounter at that site. That is why I say, even if you are collecting data from someone to continue with him, then he must agree to move with you every time. I want to move fast here because I've covered everything. Let me move. Okay, and I want us to talk about data now. In interview data collection, recordings of interviews are transcribed into the data of the study. You see, somebody is saying, I read somewhere, I forgot the author. I think the author was unknown, who said that you can still record the what you observe, because what you observe you can repeat into a tape recorder, and that recorder can take what you have seen, and that you will transcribe. You will be able to use it at a later stage. But someone would say that you cannot record things that you see. No, it's just different school of thoughts. But I believe that if you see something, you can say, I'm seeing a lion which is running away. I'm seeing a lion which is catching a zebra. That one you can say, even if you have observed. Because what you see, you're still going to write. You can say what you will write. Instead of writing, you can say it to a tape recorder, so a tape recorder takes that. But it looks funny. Do you think if you are in the middle of people, the people that you are working with, will you always be able to repeat what you are saying? It looks funny. That is why maybe some people don't believe that you need to use tape recorder. But field notes that you use handwriting to capture. This is not possible for participant observation work because one, oral recordings of observation are not possible. Oh, yeah, it is this gentleman who says it is not possible to record. Conversations take place on site, are not easily recorded. Okay? And say, for instance, you are not only focusing on an individual, you are focusing on a group. And in a group, we are in a soccer field. There's just a larger group of people, 24 people that are there playing soccer. Then how do you record all of them? Because they will be speaking at the same time, they will be shouting. and they will be some of them will be closer to the recording device, some of them will be far. So there's challenges with the practicality of using a tape recorder. Instead, the participant observer takes notes either during the fieldwork or at the day's end. You see now, during the fieldwork, if he is an observer, he can write. We said an observer has got more time to write, but if he is a participant, he can do it at the day's end. These notes, called field notes, are then the primary form of data for participants' observation work. Because field notes are your primary form of data, you cannot be stingy with the time. Though it means you can stay long. You must give yourself time in order to be there for sometimes to observe and be able to record the information, your experiences correctly. Most practitioners suggest it takes at least the same amount of time to write up notes as it takes to be in the field. And many suggest it takes double the time. We are left with 30 minutes now. If you spend 3 hours at a meeting of the organization you are observing, it is a good idea to set aside 5 to 6 hours to write out your field notes. You see now, 3 hours times to 5 to 6. Different researchers use different strategies about how and when to do this. Somewhat obviously, the earlier you can write down your notes, the more likely they are to be accurate. Writing them down at the end of the day is thus the difficult practice because you are tired. If you are from the field and you have been observing from morning to evening, then you are very tired. You cannot be able to sit. Remember, if you have been observing for 8 hours, you need, according to this author, you need at least 16 hours, or that if it is 3 times, then it's 24 hours. So you don't have enough time. And we are saying when you are tired, then you must then reserve it to write it the next morning. And I think there's a recommendation like that. But the other challenge is that the more you wait, you are forgetting. Then what you're going to write down is not going to be accurate. Then some of the things will fall. The information is going to fall along the cracks, and your data is not going to be recorded accurately. What should be included in those field notes now? The obvious answer is everything you observe and heard relevant to your research question should be included. The difficulty is that you often don't know what is relevant to your research question when you begin. And your research question itself can develop and transform during the course of your observation. You must remember, you are led by the events as they unfold. Because here you are going to capture, if you are an observer, sometimes you are capturing the experiences, life experiences of your participants, the people that you are observing. So you want to know what would be there at the beginning. So, but as time continues and as you interact with them, you grow in understanding their culture, you grow in understanding their experiences, and then your capacity even to capture becomes even better. So you want to be able to know what to capture. You will only know it only during the course of the capturing. Yeah, but there are some suggestions for things to include in your field notes as you begin, and the 3 of them are: description of the physical setting. You describe what you see, where the events are taking place, where the people are, where people are drinking, or where the people are playing soccer, where the people are fighting, boxing, or where people are singing. That is the study physical setting, the study setting. People in the site, who they are and how they interact with one another, and things overhead, conversations, exchanges, and questions, because these exchanges, conversations, and questions constitute what is important for you. That is the data. So, in other words, you have got to any area with its people and the language and the dynamics that are taking place there. These need to be recorded in your field notes because they are very, very important in data analysis. You will be able to see that. While you should develop your own personal system for organizing these field notes, computer versus printed journal, for an example, at a minimal, each set of field notes should include the date. You see, whether you are capturing this the information electronically or handwriting, through your handwriting. You must have the date on which events are taking place or activities, the date where you're collecting data. You must put the time. What time was it? In the morning, in the afternoon? Is it 2 o'clock or it is 9 o'clock? Eh? Persons observed. Do we have adults? Do we have the youth? We've got men. We've got females. Who do we have? Do we have people that we've got students, or do we have only the elders? And location specifics. You might also add keywords to each set so that you can search, but this is when you've taken notes. Then you can put keywords so that you can know where to find specific activities or where to find a participant or the date or the location of the events that are under investigation. Now, there is a recommendation by Lirao from Host 2023, from Host 2023, who says the following should be covered. Right, which is who? The W, which stand for who, what, when, and how. And the R, which is the reaction. These are the things that must be recorded. You must record all these. The I, the inaction, the silence, or non-verbal responses to action. You see, we said the non-verbal responses are very important and they are meaningful. And they display a behavior and the action of a person. So the I stands there for inaction if people are not even active. P, timing, how slowly or how quickly someone is speaking. And E, how are the emotions? Non-verbal signs of emotions and or stoicism. When somebody is angry, although if they're not telling you, they would be frowning. And people that are laughing will indicate a laughter emotion. So this is an advice from Lurao. Right, that's what you need to include. In addition to the observational field notes, if you have time, it is a good practice to write reflective memos in which you ask yourself what you have learned. You have learned either about the study or about your abilities in the. So earlier on we were talking about your positionality, your reflexivity, how you affect, and you are affected by the study itself. So the people will affect you, but you will also affect them. So you are learning or you are impacting and being impacted. If you don't have time to do this for every set of field notes, at least get in the practice of memorizing it at certain key junctures. Perhaps after reading through a certain number of field notes, then you put down your memos. How did I experience? How was my experience in that setting on that date when the specific event was taking place? These memos can then be appended to relevant field notes, and you will see you will be grateful for them when it comes to time to analyze your data, as they are a preliminary by the seat of your pen. Remember, with data analysis, you make meanings, you assign meanings to those experiences, you assign meanings to the data that has been collected. That although people were laughing, maybe laughter means that they are hiding something or they are happy, or when people are frowning, they don't like something, or they're annoyed, or they don't like to interact with you. You can assign a meaning of that. So these field notes need to be appended to all the data that you collect. So you can use it during data analysis. And this field note will also help steer you towards the study you want to pursue, rather than allow you to wallow in unfocused data. You see now it's one advantage. I don't want to talk about the ethics of fieldwork. Now, we are going to do the last slides. And the last slides, there are only two here. But even before we could go to those last slides, let me pause for a moment so that I can allow for engagement and interaction. Then we can recap and look at the advantages and the disadvantages and see if this is a good method of collecting data to some of us who are here. Then we can justify like that. And it is time to make comments and it is time to ask questions.
As you were presenting, Doctor, I'm just asking myself, especially with observation as a data collection method, I'm just
Yes.
asking myself, uh, as we have made an example of a culture,
Yeah.
it would be difficult for, let's take a female who would want to go and observe the initiation culture as an example. Obviously, it might be there might be a limitation, or even not necessarily a lady, even any
Eh,
person who has never gone to an initiation school. So
oh,
I think it will be difficult for that person to choose an observation as a data collection method, because obviously that particular person won't gain access to the observation site.
yes, I know it. You know what happens? Ah, I'm left with 21% of the power, and it started to light. At any time, it can go down. But at least we've done 90% of the work. But let's engage at this last moment. I like what you just commented, because ukutwala is not necessarily ukutwala for initiation schools. Ukutwala is when a gentleman uh, is is actually um, taking a female for a marriage. I think it is there in a number of our African cultures. But in our culture, for the initiations, some people are also Baba Twala, then they can take you and force you to go to the initiation school. It used to happen in olden days. So, and the other thing is, you cannot see what they do at an initiation school if you have not attended one when it was necessary for you. So only those people that have attended, then they've got an opportunity to go in. And I know there is a protocol that you also follow. If you are you from the Denguni culture, or are you from Tsonga? Are you Tsonga speaking?
A bit of Tsonga, though my Tsonga is no longer. I'm no longer fluent in Tsonga. I'm originally Tsonga, but at school I did isiZulu.
Yeah, you see now, in other cultures they will always not allow you to access these sites. You must undergo the protocol, and the protocol is when you must attend the initiation, then you can go inside there. So a possible researcher is only the one who has been part and parcel of the initiation. So this example is very good. So a foreign person and a person who never attended, not, you can't collect data there. You must first be initiated. Thank you very much for that example. It's very good. Any other comment?
And then
From,
as a follow up, Doctor, sorry to just barge in. Apart
yes.
from thematic analysis, is there any other form of data analysis for this type of method? I only know for thematic analysis.
I have not looked at that, but uh, I know that um, I followed the yeah, the thematic one. I think it's very important and it's very relevant. I don't know any other that has been used specifically to analyze this data. And I think when we go to data analysis, let's just remind each other, and we can explore a number of them and see the ones that are relevant and those that are irrelevant. So let's pack it. I have not studied that one. I can't answer it from the heart. But thematic analysis is I have used. Anyway, so when I did the transect works, I did use thematic analysis. Any other comment? Can one take photo during observation and use them to supplement field? Yeah, you know what? I did not present everything here. I just selected some notes. You know, when I was studying today and I was making preparation, I even read that you can take photographs, you can use videos, you can even use participant observation with archival archives. So it means documents. Documentary analysis can also supplement and can be triangulated with this type of research. You can take videos, you can take pictures. It is allowed. I have just not read about it. Otherwise, I would be having 200 slides here. But it is fair. We can, if you want us to explore this, then we can explore it even in future. But please do read, and you can share with us next time. Any further question? We are left with 16. Yeah, see, it is 1914. Then 16 minutes towards closure.
Dr. Korombi, if you scroll up, some
Yes.
researchers have made remarks about.
Oh, yes,
Yes,
I see. I
recording.
thought this was the only one. Oh, okay. Yes. Basil said, side note, my supervisor warned against using a cell phone to record conversations during interviews and observations. She recommends using a voice recorder as this puts the interviewee at ease. Oh, yeah, that might be an experience. I want to tell you that I have never used a tape recorder. And where I recorded is only in one. It was focus groups, and there I've used 2 cell phones. So, and I was dealing with peer co-workers. That is where I had backyard research. It were people with who I was working, and they all were using cell phones, and they all had cell phones in that very meeting. But I take this note. I think she has got a good experience that people can be uncomfortable when they see you using maybe those devices. Maybe they associate it with less professionalism. And thank you for that comment. The other one by Tabang, a nursing student wants to know what is happening between the doctor and student, but the doctor won't be freely touching the patient. Yes, I agree. I agree. This is what you were telling us. This was an excellent example. I enjoyed listening to your comments, colleagues. I get worried for doctors and receptionists who don't wear protective gear in the health sector. Yes, it's also it's not good if they don't have protective gear, because there anything can infect you. You see, this working environment is highly hazardous because you don't know how you would be infected. Everybody would come there, whether you're coughing, whether you are HIV infected, your blood would affect people. If you have got a skin disease that is contagious, is it smallpox or whatever, then it can affect people. So it's important for the staff and for the people at the front desks to actually protect themselves, because they can also be agents of transfer. They can infect other patients or anybody else or other co-workers if they don't behave and take care of themselves. The patient might display a hesitation to be approached in fear of infecting others. Yes, it's sure. Those people those people that are sensitive and sympathetic towards others, even if they are sick, they wouldn't want others to be in the same situation as they are. Then they would always want to protect others. No, don't die because I'm dying. No, don't be infected because I'm infected, because it is hard to be sick. The doctor's mission is to help the sick and include those infected. Indeed, if you remember Florence Nightingale, she never slept, and she was known as the lady with a lamp, just because she was dedicated, whether it is day or night, she was helping, because nursing to her was a calling. So the profession of being a doctor and being a nurse is still a calling, and people should actually try to execute. You see, unfortunately, most of us, we are not, our careers is not our calling. We are there only because it was the only option available for me to get appointed. Otherwise, I would not have got a job. It was the only job available at the time that I was seeking for the job. Or I even challenge a senior position where I'm not competent. Just because it pays a higher salary, then I challenge. Even if I'm not competent, I go and sit there and lay eggs. So people should actually work in accordance with their calling. So are the doctors and the nurses. Any other? We are left with 12 minutes. Any other comment? So is everybody happy? So colleagues, we are closing now, and I'm going to hand over to Linda. But let me say to you, you have heard, we have spoken. You see, I think since the beginning, since May, we started in May. Since the beginning of May, and we have been talking about the research approach, the research methods, the research design, data collection methods. Now, sometimes next month we might even start talking about data analysis. From there, we would even go, if November allows, or somewhere mid October, we even talk about the presentation of the research results, how to compile a report. But you always hear that there is no day that I don't mention a statement that the successful execution of the research project is dependent on the student himself or herself. It's not dependent on the study leader. The study leader is there to guide, but he can only guide if there is a point of departure. And the point of departure is the proposal that the student has. Then a point of departure for chapter 2 for literature review is the initial literature draft, is the draft literature chapter that the researcher has prepared, and the study that needs to guide based on what work the student has done. So the choice of whatever we do is very, very important. And one thing that I've noted in life is that your choice should be in line with your interest in life. Otherwise, you are going to research something that is going to not even going to contribute to your development holistically in life. But if you research in accordance with what you like, then you would not be a doctor who would run away from COVID infected patients. You would be a doctor that moves closer to them. And in that way, people will even see that this person is actually working in accordance with his calling, because that is what your behavior would be demonstrating. So if someone observing you and researching you, the relationship between you as a doctor and the patient would say indeed his behavior demonstrates that he has got a doctoral calling or a nursing calling. Those are my comments, so to encourage you that, and you don't have to fear. And I've said the only thing you can be confident with yourself is when you study. You must be able to study relevant literature, and there's a variety of ways of finding which literature is relevant. We've got support from the library, we've got the study leader, we've got colleagues, we've got our peers in the same profession and discipline where we are. So we can be confident on our own. And I just say, whether I'm doing master's, PhD, or honors, I am the master and the leader and an expert in the field where I am investigating. That my topic is only known, is best known by me, in and out, and I will demonstrate it to the supervisor. Any question that he asks, I'll be able to stand for, because I'm really, really confident. That happens when we dedicate ourselves and we study. So we grow. Let me hand over. If you don't have further comments, let me hand over to Linda so she can close. And next time, I think we do not have a session on Tuesday because it's the 24th, which is a holiday. But Thursday next week. Oh no, we still have this Thursday. Then it is documentary research. Unless if anything happens that we don't focus on it, but it will be the documentary research this Thursday.
Thank you, Dr. Korombi, and to our researchers as well. Let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for their active participation in tonight's workshop.